Today's daf is daf Vav, and we'll begin at daf Hey Amid Beis at the bottom. And we saw yesterday that there were a double drash. The drasha from Le'yara Lecha, that shall not be seen to you, is a drasha to tell us that you can't see your own chametz, but you're allowed to see other people's chametz. And as we explained, that's a non-Jew who brings chametz into your possession, and not into your possession, into your property. And we also saw that it should not be found in your home, is to tell you that even someone else's chametz in your possession is going to be usher and needs biur. You have to remove that from your house. So the Gemara asks, well, that's a contradiction. And the Gemara makes a distinction between whether kibul alav achrayis or not, that he accept upon himself the responsibility for that chametz or not. What level of responsibility is a machlokas in the Gemara in the Nezikin? We learn that there are three types of responsibilities a person can have on someone else's money. It can have a level of kibul achrayis, accepting responsibility, to the level of pshia, that if I'm negligent, then I have to pay back to you any damages that happened to it, but only based on negligence. And that's called the shomer chinam, somebody who's watching something for someone else without pay, just asking for a favor, as it were. So that's a level of guarding it for someone else. It's a minimal level of responsibility. If it gets stolen, I'm not responsible. I'm only responsible for it if I'm negligent. So that's the least responsible. The next level is if somebody is responsible for the level of geneva v'aved. If it gets lost or stolen, I'm responsible, but I'm not responsible for armed robbery. I'm not responsible for, in other words, if I did a typical guarding of this object and yet something happens to it, I'm not responsible to anything that happens to it. And the most extreme level of responsibility is called the shoel, somebody who borrows something, and they are responsible even for onus, even if something happens under duress, armed robbery or something unexpected happens. That level is the most extreme level. What level of responsibility is the Gemara discussing here? The simple reading of the Gemara over here would be that Rava says to the people of Mechuzah that they have to get rid of the property of the soldiers, the redcoats, that put their wheat and stuff into their house. So that level seems to be the middle case, because Rava said the ilu mitba. The reason why you're responsible for this chametz is because if it were to be ilamigna ve'ilamitbat, if it had been stolen or lost, and that doesn't seem to be wording of negligence. It also doesn't seem to be the wording of armed robbery or total financial responsibility. It's a responsibility in the simple reading of geneva va'aveda, where it got lost or stolen, and that's going to be the responsibility that someone accepts upon themselves, and that will make it considered into their possession. So that since you are responsible for this, you accepted responsibility, it considered your chametz. And what you have to do is either, some posts can say you can just do a bittul, since it's enough, whatever rights you have to it, whatever money is in yours, you would nullify it. Some posts can say you cannot nullify this because it's not yours, to consider it null and void, whether bittul is through hefker, making it ownerless, you're not the owner to make it ownerless, and if you make it bittul, like worthless, it's not worthless either to you. So you'd have to either deposit it by someone else who could watch it for that time, or designate a space. We saw later that there's a designated space, that there are different ways of doing this. In any case,
So what we saw is that if you take responsibility for chametz, it's considered in your possession. If you don't take responsibility for chametz, then it can be in your possession because it's only prohibited if it's in your if it's yours. So the Gemara says, this is 3 lines from the bottom. Hey Amid Beis, 5b. This is fine according to the opinion that says that anything that is that causes you an expense is considered your money. Something that you are financially responsible for is considered your money. So according to that opinion, that makes sense that over here, this chametz is going to be in your possession. But according to the opinion that says that as a general rule, that's not considered in your possession. So why do you have to get rid of such chametz? Even though that it's going to cost you money if something happens to it, but that it's still only a davar hagorim l'mammon. It's something that's going to cause you an expense, but right now it belongs to someone else. So the Gemara says, over here we have a special pasuk for that. It says, "Lo yimatzei bevatechem," it shall not be found in your house. And so that clearly the distinction is going to have to be whether you have responsibility for it, it's going to cost you money or not. Ikeda Amri. There are those that say that the Gemara first thought the other way around. It's so obvious that this answer that the Gemara had it the other way around. It makes sense according to the opinion that says that's an expense that you have, or a potential expense that you have, does not consider it your money. That's why we need a pasuk. So now we go to Vav Amid Aleph 6a. Hainu de itzrach le'yimatzeh. That's why we need this special teaching of le'yimatzeh. The Torah tells us that you're responsible for this, because generally you would not be responsible, would not be considered yours. You're responsible, but it's not considered yours on account of this responsibility. And therefore we have the special teaching of le'yimatzeh b'vatechem to tell you that this is going to count as yours enough that you have to get rid of it. But the one who says that generally this is the teaching, that if anything that could potentially cause you financial loss, if it gets if you have if it gets stolen, etc. So then generally that's considered in your possession on account of the potential responsibility for it, or financial loss. So what I need a special teaching by chametz to tell you that it's yours. That's always the case. Itzrich. Nevertheless, I need a teaching here. I may have thought because Pesach, let's say it's still in my possession. I did not get rid of it for Pesach. The non-Jew comes to pick up their stuff after Pesach. I can say, here's yours. This is the chametz you deposited here. Even though if it had gotten lost, I would have to pay cash. But when it's here and he picks it up, even after Pesach, it's his. So they go ahead, and so then it's not considered in my possession. It's still as it is right now, is his, that he can come pick up, the non-Jew that can come pick it up, and therefore it's not in the possession of the Jew. Kamash Malan, that's what the teaching of Le'yimatzeh is, to tell you that even while it's still there and ready to be picked up, it's still considered within the possession of the non-Jew, of the Jew. And therefore he has to get rid of it for Pesach. Baimene Mirava. Question was asked based on this idea of a Jew having something that a non-Jew can then pick up and take. Is that considered his or not? Question about taxes. The Romans had created some tax where Caesar can come and take a certain percentage of the crop and a certain percentage of the flock every year. And Caesar didn't come himself; he usually sent some of the goods. In any case, so behemas arnona is their tax term. So an animal of arnona, chayevas bebechora, ein chayevas bebechora. Since this animal was born to a Jew, so it would, and it's a firstborn, it would have to be a bechor. However, there's a partner in this animal, the Romans,
and the Torah says, all firstborn of Yisrael belong to me. So this is not Yisrael. This has a non-Jew partner in this, whether we like it or not. There's a partner here. So if you can pay your tax, and when the tax collector comes and says, "Oh, you have 40 new animals," you have 40 new animals. So we're going to charge you the value of 10 of them and pay cash or give me the animals. So if he can pay cash, so they're going to say there's no question. Of course, you're obligated because there's no partner in this animal. It's just a tax. You have to pay up cash, and therefore you're chayiv and b'chor. So what's the question? That it's not up to the animal's owner to decide whether they pay cash or the animal. The tax collector is going to decide that, and he can't just say, "Look, I'll pay you cash. I want this animal. This is a good animal." The tax collector can take the animal itself, so then he's a partner in the animal. My amalu patura. So Rava said, indeed, that would be an exemption. But we have a brisa that says that he is obligated in bachor. That obligation that the brisa is talking about is where he can actually pay cash and tell him, "Look, I want the animal. Here's cash in place." Since the animal's owner could tell him, "I'm giving you cash," that means he's not a partner in the animal. It's just a tax. Ikeda Amri, that those that say that Rava said in either case, there's going to be an exemption. If there is a tax that could come on this animal, you're exempt because that means that Caesar has a partnership with you. And even if you can send them away, that would also, with cash, nevertheless, the cash is a replacement for the animal, meaning that they are partners in the animal anyhow. However, that brisa that says that you're obligated, that's talking about something else. Isas arnona, chiyavas b'chala. It's talking about a dough of arnona. That's where you're going to be obligated in chala, even though there as well, the halacha is that if a non-Jew is partner with a Jew, in that the dough of a non-Jew is going to be exempt of challah, because it says ariso seichem, your dough is obligated in challah. And even though you cannot pay him and say, "Look, I'm going to pay you cash, just let me keep my flour, let me keep my dough, my bread," you can't send him away. In other words, he's a real partner with the tax collector is a partner with you. Nevertheless, for dough, you're obligated to take challah, and not really because you're obligated, but because it doesn't look good. My time of behema is lakala. By an animal, people know that the tax collector came, or is coming, or that there's a tax due on this, and therefore they know that this is a partnership with Caesar. Isa less lakala, but with a dough, it just looks like you're eating without having taken challah, and that is that's a problem, and that's the reason why you're obligated in challah of a isas arnona, a dough that the crop is responsible for tax, even though that they can come and take the bread itself. Back to our halacha of checking for chametz or chametz of a non-Jew in your possession. Tanaban, nachri, a non-Jew, shenichnes lachatzer sheYisrael b'tzeka yodi, comes into your property on Pesach. He walks in and he's got a dough there with him. He has he's eating a muffin. Ein zakik levar. You don't have to tell him, "Take that off my property." You don't have to get rid of that chametz because it's not yours, as we saw before. Obviously, that you did not accept responsibility for that. Hifkido etzlo, but if he did leave it with you, in other words, he deposits something with you, says, "I have something, I need you to watch for me," and it's his his loaves of bread, whatever it may be. Zakik levar. So since you're taking responsibility of that, you have to get rid of it. You cannot be in possession of that chametz. Rashi throws in V'kibel alav achrais. It's not just that it was deposited there, but he accepted responsibility. And since he accepted responsibility, and we talked about this earlier, that there are three levels of accepting responsibility. Generally, the first level of just not being negligent, Rashi wouldn't have to tell us that he accepted responsibility. That's always accepting responsibility. Once somebody puts something in your possession, you can't be negligent. So Rashi obviously is going with the opinions that it has to be some sort of level of more responsible than that. And so he accepted the responsibility of at least Geneva Vaveda, at least that if it gets stolen or lost, that he would be irresponsible, and therefore it becomes his possession for Pesach, and he must get rid of it. Yichid lo bayis ein zakek levar. However, if the way Rashi interprets this is that he did not accept responsibility, he just says, all right, if you want, you can go put it somewhere in the house and find yourself a corner and put it there, essentially saying, I'm not taking any extra responsibility other than whatever my house is. I'm not going to be negligent, leave it out in the front yard, but I'm not doing anything for it. Tosa says no, that it's different. What it's talking about, that he accepted responsibility, but he put it in a specific place. He says, sure, that shed is all yours. And so since he said that room, that shed, wherever he put it, is now essentially the land is leased to the non-Jew for his chametz, and or gifted, even if he's not paying for it, and therefore it's not considered in my possession. But we're going to go with Rashi. Rashi says, he says the house is available for you. Find a corner, put it there. That's your space, and therefore he's indicating he's not taking responsibility for it. And then ein zakek levar, he's not responsible to get rid of this chametz for Pesach. Shemar, for it says liyimatzei, because it says it shall not be found in your house. So my comment, what proof is he bringing from the text that says lo yimatzei b'beteichem, it should not be found in your house? In which way does that indicate that you're exempt for this chametz? Amar Papa Areishakai. So Rav Papa says, yeah, that proof, that text, that pasuk is not coming for the second halacha where you didn't accept responsibility. It's on the first part where you did accept responsibility. If since he deposited with you and you accepted responsibility, zakek levar, you must get rid of it. Shenemar liyimatzei, because it says it shall not be found in your houses. That means even if it's not yours, you're responsible. Ravashi Omar lo ilam asefekoi. Ravashi says no. It's talking about the reason why it's exempt when you yichud labayis, when you did not accept responsibility. You just told him, go take it into the house. And this is what he means to say. Yichud labayis, since you gave him a specific house, as according to Tosos, as Rashi, that you just told him, here, take this corner, or find a space for yours, and that's going to be your space. Ein zakek levar, he doesn't have to get rid of it. Shenemar liyimatzei b'vateichem, because it says it shall not be found in your house. This is not mine found in my house, but rather the nachri ma'ayil lebesa the nafshei kamayil, because whatever the non-Jew brings in, it is essentially bringing into his own space, because the Jew had allowed him a corner. It says, hey, go take it to the corner, take it wherever you want. That's your space for your chametz. I'm not taking responsibility. You put it there. You come pick it up when you want. It's your own thing. So therefore, he's going to be exempt because it says liyimatzei b'vateichem. It shouldn't be found in your house, and this is not your house. It's essentially found by the non-Jew. So we're now going to get into what kind of responsibility is the space itself. This is essentially what we're saying is that the non-Jew is acquiring by rental this land that the Jew designated for him, or told him he can put a space in. Now, what you're saying is that schirus kanya, that is a proper acquisition of the land itself and not just a usage of that space. Lamemra the schirus kanya. What you're saying to me is that rental of real property, leasing real property, is an acquisition. What we learned, Af makam shamru lahasker, even in places that we say that you're allowed to lease to an idolater living space in Eretz Israel, lola based dira. Um, However, even though that it's generally living space, you can't lease it to the idolater as living space, but rather it has to be used for storage space. Uh, because if you lease it to them as living space, because they're going to bring an idol into there, and you cannot facilitate in your own home to have an idolatry, an idol brought into it. And if you're going to tell me that this is right, that the lease of this land for the usage that the idolater has, so he's bringing the idol into his own place. He's bringing it into his own space. So what issue would there be? You're right. In by idolatry, that's true. But by chametz, the halacha is lo yimatze b'beteichem. It should not be found in your place. What does finding mean? Misha matzu b'yadcha yatzeh she'eina matzu b'yadcha. That means you have access to it. When you find it, it's available to you. Over here, this is not considered available to you because that specific spot is designated for the non-Jew, the chametz. Essentially, what when you tell this person, take it, put it into the place, and that's going to be yours. What we're talking about is I'm not taking responsibility. I'm also not going to move it from there. I'm going to leave it where you put it. So find a place out of the way, put it there, and that's yours. And then you wouldn't touch it, and therefore it remains in the possession and not really available to you, and it's in the possession of the Nachri. Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. Now back to checking for chametz. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rav that once you've checked for chametz and you did your bittul, you nullified, you did everything you were supposed to do, and Pesach comes in the middle of Yantif and you find chametz, so you miss that spot. So you find chametz in your house, but Yantif on Yantif. Kafal of kli. Since it's Yantif, you cannot. It's muksa. There's nothing to do with this item. You cannot burn it today because that's making a fire for without need. So you just put a vessel over it and protect it so that you don't come to eat it. But in and of itself, you can't do anything to it. Amar Rava imshel hekdeshu. So Rava adds, however, if it doesn't belong to you, it belongs to hekdesh. Ein tzarich. You don't need to do that because my time. What's the reason? Because mivdal b'dilamine, since it's designated as hekdesh, even on a regular day you wouldn't eat it. So on Pesach for sure you wouldn't because it's chametz. So if this is designated as something that's a gift to the Beis Hamikdash, there's no need to cover it. You wouldn't touch it and eat it anyhow. Another statement Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, if you have a non-Jew's chametz in your house for Pesach, in a manner that was permissible before, like lokibel of you can accept responsibility, and there's chametz in the house. It has to be out of sight, and so you have to have a barrier of at least 10 tefachim to make it into a specific space. Mishum heker, and that's going to give you a reminder not to get involved with that, not to take any, not to eat any on Pesach. And here too, it says ve'im shel hekdesh hu ein tzarich. If it belongs to the Beis Hamikdash, if it's hekdesh, you don't need to do that because in any case, all year round, you wouldn't be touching it. My time, people are separated from it because it belongs to hekdesh. You want to be careful with it. In any case, you never come to eat it. Another statement Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav. Somebody who is leaving this space or traveling in a caravan. So Kodim Shaloshim Yom, if they leave prior to Purim, so they're leaving more than 30 days before Pesach, before the obligation of checking for chametz, ein zakik levad. So you don't have to get rid of your chametz now, because in any case, it's before the time of Pesach. If it's within the 30 days of Yantiv, zakik levad, you are obligated in the mitzvah already. Because 30 days before the Yantiv, as the Gemara is going to explain, it is already considered the season, the time of Yantif. 30 days beforehand, all the mitzvahs of Yantif to prepare become relevant. The halachas of the obligation of learning the halachas become relevant, and therefore, you're at that point the obligation is already in place, and you have to remove the chametz. Amar Abaye. So Abaye explained, well, what's going on? We only understand one aspect, that the time when he's leaving, but when does he plan to come back? Amar Abaye, so Abaye says the obligation to check if you leave within 30 days of Pesach, that's because you're intending to come back within the time of Pesach. But if you have no plans to come back before or during Pesach, whether you don't plan to come back at all, you don't plan to come back until after Pesach, so you have no need to remove this chametz, because in any case, there's no chance that you're going to come into contact with this chametz on Pesach. Abaye. So Abaye said, wait, if he plans to come back in the middle of Pesach, why would be exempt of checking for Pesach, for chametz? He plans to come back on Pesach. What's he going to do? He's going to show up on Pesach and then start checking for chametz? If he plans to come back, afilu b'Rosh Hashanah nami, even if he leaves 6 months beforehand, before Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah time, right? In other words, no matter when he leaves, if he plans to come back on Pesach, he's going to have to be prepared and get rid of the chametz, so that when he arrives on Pesach, he's going to find a house that has no chametz in it. Elam Rava, it's rather Rava says, it's the other way around. This that it says that if you left 30 days or more prior, right, more than 30 days prior to Yantif, that you're exempt and you don't have to do B'dikun. That's on account of that you don't plan to come back by Yantif. But if you plan to come back at Yantif time, even from the beginning, you're obligated, even from the beginning of the year, you'd be obligated in checking for chametz before you leave. As Rava explained, according to his interpretation, somebody turns his house, his living space, into a storage house. That means that he brings into a specific place a whole bunch of wheat, and because he didn't check beneath it, there's going to be chametz beneath the produce that he put into there. So now this produce is essentially non-accessible. But if he already had the obligation of checking for chametz, it doesn't make a difference if now it's inaccessible. He had the obligation to clean it beforehand. That obligation was never fulfilled. So he says like this. If he turned the house, this storage shed, into a storage area and filled it with produce prior to 30 days of Yantif, more than 30 days prior to Yantif, ein zakuk levat. So he doesn't have to. He never had the obligation of removing the chametz because it's inaccessible. However, if he filled this within 30 days of Yantif, zakuk levat, he does have to go check and remove the chametz because he already had the obligation prior to filling the house with produce. Even prior to 30 days, it's only if he doesn't plan to empty it prior to Yantif. But if he plans to empty it before Yantif or during Yantif, so then he may end up finding the chametz on Yantif. So even if it's even if it's before 30 days that he filled this with his produce, he's going to have to check for chametz. Now mizakir levar, he's going to have to check for chametz because maybe he's going to end up emptying it at or during Yantif, and he's going to find some chametz. So the Gemara says, where does this 30-day number come from? Why pick 30 days? Kedatanya, like we learned in a brisa, 30 days prior to Yantif, there's an obligation to start learning and teaching the halachas of Yantif, and that brisa teaches us that 30 days before Yantif is already that season of the Yantif, and you have to begin to learn the halachos, and you have to begin to teach the halachos, and therefore also all the responsibilities of the yontif and the preparation for yontif are incumbent on each person. However, he says that it's not an obligation of 30 days, but rather 2 weeks. My time in the Tanakh. So what is this based on? What's the reasoning of the first opinion that says it's 30 days? Where does he get this from? We now turn to Vav Amid Beis. Shari Moshe Amid B'Pesach Harishon. Because we find that at the first Yontif of Pesach, when the Am Yisrael, the Jews were bringing the Korban Pesach, the people that were Tameh, that had become Tameh, come into contact with a deceased person, with the children of Aaron, so they were Tameh, and they said, Lamani Gara, why should we miss out on bringing the Korban Pesach? We were just doing an obligation of taking care of the dead, and now we can't bring a Korban Pesach. And Moshe taught then about Pesach Sheni, the second Pesach, about Iyar, the 15th, the 14th day of Iyar, to bring the Korban Pesach then as a replacement for this Pesach, and that was 30 days prior. So you see that you teach and learn the halachas 30 days prior to the halacha. U'mazer ala Pesach Sheni, Shenema, for it says, V'yaseh b'nei Yisrael es Pesach b'ma'aden, and b'nei Yisrael should do the Pesach in their time. And it says right there, the Am Yisrael did the Pesach, so we know it was the 14th day of Nisan, and it says over there, and there were these people that were Tameh, and they asked Moshe, what are we going to do about it? And Moshe said that they can do a Pesach in the next month. So you see that 30 days prior, he was teaching them about the halachas of Pesach Sheni. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, I did the Iri b'mili the Pischa masik lulachal mili Pischa. No, that's not proof. They were in the middle of doing the Pesach, so he's teaching all the halachas of Pesach. But normally you wouldn't have to teach 30 days before it. So what's the basis of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel that says that it's less? It's 2 weeks. My time in Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, Shari Moshe Amid B'Rosh HaChodesh, because the first teaching of bringing the Korban Pesach was in Mitzrayim. In Parshas Bo, Moshe is after the plague of the darkness, and Hashem says to Moshe, it's Rosh Chodesh, Am Yisrael should make the Rosh Chodesh, and there it says, and they shall bring a Korban Pesach. So you see, it's 2 weeks before, and they're bringing a Korban Pesach. He's standing on Rosh Chodesh, and Maza ala Pesach, Shanema HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodesh, because it says over there that this renewal of the moon that I'm showing you now, Moshe, this is the Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the month. So you see, it's talking about Rosh Chodesh. And there it says, speak to Bnei Israel, and to the congregation of Israel, and tell them on the 10th day of this month they shall take a lamb, and they'll shecht it on the 14th. So you see that the shechting of the 14th, which is the mitzvah, 2 weeks beforehand, Moshe is telling them to do this mitzvah. Now the Gemara says, how do you know that it was on Rosh Chodesh? Maybe it was on the 4th or 5th day of the month. How do you know that that's talking about Rosh Chodesh? Well, look at the next year, because it says Hashem spoke to Moshe in the Midbar Sinai, in the desert, B'Shana Hashenis, on the second year, B'Chodesh Harishon, on the first month, and it says that the teaching that Bnei Israel should do the Korban Pesach in their time. Yeah, but who tells you again? Who tells you it's talking about on Rosh Chodesh itself? Maybe it's 4 or 5 days into the month already. Midbar mi midbar. We learn midbar, the word midbar here, desert, from where it says a midbar over there. It says over here in the desert of Sinai. And there it says that Hashem spoke to Moshe in the desert of Sinai at the tent of meeting on the first day of the second month. Just as over there when it says Bamid Sinai, it's referring to Rosh Chodesh. Afkan Rosh Chodesh, so too here, it's on Rosh Chodesh. So the Gemara says, well, then it's out of order, because that's the beginning of that's the beginning of the book of Bamidbar, of the Sefer Bamidbar, and the verse that we brought earlier about the beginning of Nisan, that's in the ninth parak. That's the ninth chapter of Bamidbar. So that happens later. So why is it written out of order? So why is chapter 9, the ninth chapter, that should be the first chapter, it should be written first, and then the second Rosh Chodesh Sheni, the second month's Rosh Chodesh. So we taught in the name of Rav Zosam Meres. From here and many other places we learn, Ein Muktam Amocha Torah. The Torah is not in chronological order. The Torah is written in many things. It discusses one subject matter and runs to another subject matter that happened earlier. We see this a lot in the parshas that we're reading now. It spoke about Yitzchak's life and the death of Yitzchak, and then goes into Yaakov's life, or the death of Avram and goes into Yitzchak's life. But really, they overlapped for many years beyond that. But nevertheless, it completes one person and then goes into the other. Various times we see in the Torah that what the Torah is writing in one place is not chronologically before or after necessarily what's right near it. However, a puppet says this is only true in two subjects, but in one subject matter, it's always chronological. Whatever it says first happened first. What it says later happened later. Because if you don't say that, klaluprat, we know that one of the drash that we have is when the Torah tells us a generalization and then a specification. However, those are not necessarily in order. So who tells you it's a generalization and then a specification? Maybe it's a specification and then a generalization. Because if you don't say this, klaluprat, the general rule we have, if the Torah generalizes and then specifies, the generalization only means what's specified and no more. Dilma prata klalu. Maybe it's the other way around because there's no chronological order, so it could be that it was said the other way around. Vesu, and similarly, prata klal, nasa klal, mosafala prat. Whenever the Torah first specifies and then gets into the generalization is expanding the specification. But if it's not in order, so it could be the other way around. Dilma klala pratu. Maybe it's a generalization and specification. So Gemara says, well, then, even in two subject matters, it should be the same, because there is an opinion that says that there is a concept of klal prat, a generalization specification, even if it's not immediately juxtaposed, but it's further away. That would be fine according to the opinion that says that there's no drash on a klal prat that are distant from each other. So then, okay, then you can say that in one subject matter it's chronological, and when it's not in one subject matter it's not chronological. But according to the opinion that says that you can say a drash of klal prat even when they are distant from each other. What are you going to say that that only in one subject matter it's chronological, but when it's multiple subjects it's not chronological? So then you don't have a klal prat. Where it says no, even when it's distant, it has to be within the same subject matter. Even if you say that a distant klal prat is going to count as a good drash of a generalization specification, it has to be one subject. It's just not immediately juxtaposed. But if they are in two subjects, that means you have it's stated here, and then there's another subject matter that states a similar thing. You can't say as a klal prat. There ain't done him. We're not going to say that there's a generalization specification on account of the distance and the new subject matter. And there, indeed, it could be that it's out of chronological order. So this ends the discussion of how do we know 30 days or 2 weeks before Yom Tov there's an obligation to learn the halachas, and based on the 30-day, Rava said that the halacha is that you have to check your home if you are leaving and you already have the obligation our Mishnah talked about of checking your home for Pesach, for chametz, in preparation for Pesach. That is an obligation that it becomes in effect 30 days before Yantiv. And even if you don't plan to come back, you have to check your home. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Another statement that Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav. Habodek, even if you do bedika, so you checked your home and there's no chametz there, tzarach sheyivatel, you must do bittul, generally meaning a nullification of the chametz. We talked about that according to Rashi, that's something in the heart. It's just the mental state of saying this is all chametz is worthless and meaningless to me, and that Tosa says that it would be an expression of renouncing ownership. And now the item is ownerless. So he said that on top of the bedika, you still have to do a bittul. And as we saw, Rashi holds that the bittul would be a fulfillment of the Torah obligation of tashbisu, of making chametz cease in your home. Not like Rabbi Akiva, who says that it requires burning. So my time, what's the reason? Is it because you're concerned about the crumbs, small pieces of chametz? Those are useless and meaningless in any case. In other words, according to Rashi's interpretation, that bittul is nullifying in your heart. That's already nullified in your heart. It's meaningless. Crumbs are of no significance. Well, then maybe what you're going to tell me is it's true. It generally is meaningless, but since you lock your door at night, it's within your possession. Anything in your possession automatically becomes, since you protect it, automatically becomes meaningful and in your home. Vatanya. But what about what we learned? Sofa ta'enim. Somebody has leftover figs on a tree. And he's protecting his field, not for the figs, but for the grapes that are still growing. And on account of Kalta is protecting his grapes, do we say that this owner is now going to be obligated in tithing those figs, or do we say no? Those are the season's over already. Those are left on the tree, so those are essentially ownerless. So, or if he's protecting his field not for the grapes because it's a past grape season, so if there's a few grapes left on the vines, but because of the gourd and pumpkins, he's leaving. He's protecting his field. So we're going to look. Is he concerned and particular that nobody take any of those grapes or those figs that are leftovers? So then nobody's allowed to take it because it would be theft, because he cares. But he's also obligated in tithing it. However, if he doesn't care of people that are traveling by and pick a few of those grapes or those figs, anybody can take them because he doesn't care about it. And it's exempt of tithing. So you see that even though that it's protected because he locks the door, right? He has a fence around it for something else. That doesn't automatically mean that the item that secondarily becomes protected is in his possession. It's still ownerless. You see that it's based on whether he still wants it or not. So for sure about these crumbs, it would be no problem. So Rava says the problem is that he may find a nice cake on Yantif, and for a moment he's going to say, that's good. Even if he nullifies it afterwards, it's not going to work, as the Gemara is about to explain, and we'll see that tomorrow after Shabbos. But the idea is that maybe he's going to find something that he missed, not the crumbs, but something important, and therefore he will want to keep it, and he will transgress the Torah prohibition of having chametz on Pesach. So we'll pick it up over here with Rava's statement